meeting is being broadcast live, and a recording of this meeting will be made available as soon as possible after the meeting has concluded. We welcome the use of Welsh language at meetings. I have had no requests for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Please can members refrain from using the chat function and instead use the raise hand icon to indicate when you want to speak. Please remember to keep your microphone muted when you are not talking. Please do not interrupt discussions until you have notified of your intention to speak and you have been invited to do so. Moving on to the agenda. Agenda item 1, welcome and apologies. Chris, do we have any apologies, please?
We do, Chair. Apologies from Councillors Nick Byrne, Sue Martin and Caroline Price. Thanks.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Rebecca, could you please ask members in alphabetical order to state whether they have any interest to declare?
Thank you, Chair. So first off, Councillor Cowells. Okay. Councillor Gordon.
Nothing, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Horler.
Not as I'm aware.
Thank you. And Councillor Thomas.
Nope, nothing for me, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, agenda item 3, minutes from the previous meeting of the 15th of the 3rd, 2022. Members, could you please state whether you have anything to raise in relation to the minutes? If not, I will take them as agreed.
Chair, I believe it was only yourself that was on the committee at the time.
Yeah.
Because there's a new member.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I
agree with them.
That's very foolish of me, wasn't it? Okay, agenda item 4, action sheet. Rebecca, could you please run through the action sheet?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So there are only 2 actions on the action sheet. The one is regarding the recommendations from the last meeting, which has been actioned, and the first one is regards to a seminar, and I am working with the officers to arrange a date for that, so I'll let the committee know as soon as that's been arranged.
Okay, thank you for that. Agenda item 5 is the Springboard Innovation Ecosystem. I'd like to welcome Rachel Jarrett, Chief Officer of Neighbourhoods and PPP, who will be introducing the report, along with Gareth Beer, Head of Economic Development, Property and Assets, and Dawson Evans, Group Leader, Strategic Economic Development, and Gaynor Waitlin, Business Development Officer. I'd also like to welcome the representative from Oxford Innovation. And do we have David Wallander in yet? No. Okay. Okay, so I'd like. So thank you for attending today, and can I invite you to contribute to the discussions at any point? Simply raise your hand icon, and I will invite you in. I'll now hand over to Rachel to give a brief introduction to the report.
Thanks, Chair. And morning, members. We had our visioning back in the summer, so it's lovely to be back in the rhythm of scrutiny with you all. Now, this report does follow from a report that came to the previous round of scrutiny, which looked at the concept of the innovation ecosystem, which the Council was proposing to start to develop through the Economy and Skills Strategy, which is just about to go through Cabinet and Council as one of the overarching strategies for the Council in terms of raising prosperity. So we know that if we raise prosperity, we raise good health, you get good jobs, and there's a whole sort of like life cycle impact on our population. Springboard, as the report outlined, has been one of our flagships for economic development since 2006, and like Gaynor and Dawson have been with it for a long time and have really helped steer that ship and the strategy forward. I know you had a tour around there last week. Its locations on one of our prime industrial estate and employment land within Cwmbran, and where, particularly, pre-COVID, whilst, the strategy of Springboard, we even recognised pre-COVID did need to be looked at in terms of, we had quite a lot of stable businesses there. They weren't moving on because they were very happy. That's brilliant. But we had good occupancy, but it was then beginning to sort of like, what was the future strategy? How did that feed into the regional agenda, particularly through, Cardiff Capital Region, Western Gateway, which is emerging through partnerships with Bristol. But in terms of then COVID has had an impact. Let's be honest, the strategy regarding office accommodation, you only have to walk around the Civic to see what's going on even with our own strategy with regards to how businesses are going to be operating. So then working with what did we want with the future of our strategy and the future of Springboard did need to be looked at. Financially, the Council is supporting the operation of Springboard, and that's contained in the report. Obviously, there's this balance of wanting to support economic development, be a council that promotes and supports businesses, but also recognising that, it is a business. And what is the role of the council and the role of that building in terms of supporting economic development and innovation. And I think that's the key part of it. Springboard was never meant to be your normal type of office block. It was about supporting new starters, building growth, getting interest and development of new companies to start up, try things, particularly in that digital innovation space. And as the report says, we've had a lot of firms develop, start, and then move on from Springboard. Sometimes in the region, sometimes in the county, sometimes not. But actually, as long as there's growth and jobs, then that is the good thing. So as part of the work through the economy and skills strategy and looking at sort of like the pressures that Springboard was facing, particularly in light of COVID, we reported to yourself previously that of our intent to work with Oxford Innovation. It's great to have Joe here today to share, and they've obviously produced an options report which you have looked at. And, they are high-level options at the moment. I think it's fair to say that, the revenue business case modelling has not been done. We've looked at capital. So this is very much a starting base because to take a full forward business case, does require a lot more work, both on capital, revenue, flows through of businesses, partnerships, etc., to come forward. But this is the start, and what we wanted to do was have scrutiny's views in terms of looking at the recommendations. Was there a preferred one? In terms of option A, obviously is do nothing, carry on as we are. That's always the baseline option. Then the do something, which was about identifying some form of investment, but carry on with the model that we've got now with the current team. Option C, then, we've then got 4 sub-options within option C. So again, that's why, this is high-level modelling because, in terms of an options assessment, you wouldn't be running 8 or 9 full options assessments on a revenue and capital modelling. You want to take it down to a handful of options to then help us really drive that business case. So your input into that is really valuable. As I said, the option C, do different, has 4 sub-options. I think for us as officers, probably C4 lease to an occupier as an HQ building. It's in there, but I'm thinking, probably not likely, is what I was thinking. And options C1 and C2 is in terms of us passing over the managing of Springboard via a management agreement or a lease. So it's slightly different with those in terms of then going forward. And then option C3 obviously is enter into a third-party commercial partnership. And then the final option C4 is, I said is that occupy, which I've mentioned, and option D, which isn't modelled, is the disposal option. But again, always has to be on the table. I think, particularly for tenants and our staff working there at the moment, it's, this is just options at this stage, recognising, finances are finite within the authority, and there's that policy decision about level of subsidy that the council wants to continue into this or try and grow and do something different. And I think your discussion today about the levels of ambition for economic development, the level of growth, the level of the role of the council in terms of supporting that, what opportunities or partnerships should we be looking at to take this forward to help us, A, have an economic development pitch and strategy. Is it a building? Is it not a building? Is it now something which is an ecosystem of wherever people work? I think there's a lot of different options for us to explore through this. Obviously, there's a detailed report from Oxford Innovation, which Joe is here to answer questions on as well. But I think for us, this is start of the dialogue as we take this forward. So happy to take any questions.
Right, thank you very much for that, Rachel. And I will open up for members to start their questions. Hope everyone feels nice and relaxed and will speak nice and freely. I think we'll start the questions off to Oxford Innovation, if that's okay. So I'll start with the first question. As part of your review, did you consider all the factors as to why the centre is not yet at full capacity or profitable?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jo Stevens, Managing Director of Oxford Innovation. I'll respond on that if that's okay. So we did quite a thorough review of the operation of Springboard based on our experience of operating a number of centres ourselves over a number of years. So we looked at all operational aspects, marketing, commercial aspects, the building infrastructure and fabric, the staff team, and the ways in which those things work together. So we used our own experience of how we would operate a comparable innovation centre elsewhere in the UK to provide a baseline analysis of where we feel Springboard is operating today. So yes, in answer to your question, we believe we have considered all aspects of the operation of Springboard as it sits today.
That's great, thank you for that. I've got another question, and if that's okay. It's on page 24, it's 3.1.5. Did you access the impact of having an entrance criteria as part of your review, and do you believe it has been counterproductive and contributed to the current financial situation?
I don't believe that an entry criteria has particularly been applied. If you look at the makeup of the companies that are occupying space at the centre at the moment, it's clear that there's a wide range of companies in a wide range of sectors, but no specific innovation focus. We operate in most of our centres varying ranges of entry criteria. And in most cases, we find those to be incredibly successful at curating the right community of businesses. The way in which I would characterise Springboard is that you've got a lot of companies in there who've clearly been there a long time, who, whilst maybe stable, are not particularly growing or exploiting innovation, either in the way in which they operate, and i.e. their business model, or in the sector that they're operating in. And I think this comes to the heart of what's the purpose of the centre. If it's about enabling companies to start up and grow, then what you don't want to have is companies that have been there indefinitely, operating on a stable basis, but without some mechanism for them to exit. So the way in which typically business incubation centres operate is to have some entry criteria, to then have review processes of how, in terms of how are those companies growing and developing over the course of their time at the centre. So you might do that on a biannual or annual basis with each company, sitting down, reviewing their aspirations, their growth trajectory and plans. And that would then enable you to work out a plan of intervention and support for them over the coming 12 months. It's clear that that's not happening at the moment on any structured basis, and therefore you've got an average length of stay in the centre of around 6 years at the moment, which, whilst incubation models have moved away from being very rigid in terms of how long companies can stay, actually there is some expectation that they don't stay indefinitely, and that you have a programme both of selection on to move in, but also selection about whether they can stay. So I believe that if a business incubation model applied appropriately actually is a very positive in terms of both of the operation and visibility and marketing of the centre, but also in terms of financial sustainability.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Horler.
Good morning. 4.1 sets out reports for you to consider as a part of your commission. However, did you speak to tenants of the Springboard or any local regional businesses or business forums, and how far did this information seek before. So how far did you look outside the premises of the location?
So we did a thorough commercial review of comparable spaces. So we looked at where else there were innovation spaces in the region, and I believe that's within the report. We also did a review of the market in terms of what those spaces were able to charge and achieve. I don't know that we did, and I'm going to just ask my colleague Tony, who did all of the consultations, whether we actually spoke to any of the customers. I know we had extensive consultations with the staff team. Tony?
Hi, thanks Joe, and thanks team. We didn't participate in consultations directly with the tenants of Springboard due to a number of factors and scope and scale of the commission. We did look back through satisfaction surveys. There had been a piece of work done previously through the team as to the forum within the centre of the hopes, wants, desires of the tenant, and also looking at demand analysis through the other centres in the area as to what they were experiencing demand for, and then reflecting that back onto Springboard's offer.
Thank you. The question, how far afield was this information sought from? So how far away from the centre did you actually go out to ask these questions?
So, Joe, sorry if I can jump in here again. So we did the commercial review covered the whole of Torfaen Borough Council area, down into Newport and across into the Cardiff sub-region. Obviously, Cardiff city centre itself is quite a different place to Cwmbran and Torfaen, but comparable spaces in and around Newport and across the borough county.
Did you not look at Bristol because of the location of how easy it is to get into Torfaen because of the people in that area? Did you not look at the Bristol area?
We know the Bristol area very well. We have our own innovation centre on the UB campus, so Future Space, which we were very pleased to welcome the team to visit. So we know the Bristol area extremely well. So yes, that will fed into our findings, if not explicitly reported within the documents.
Okay, but that wasn't considered going across the border to Bristol to look at this report? So
that our experience in Bristol will help to inform our considerations, okay. If not explicitly detailed.
Thank you.
Dawson?
Yeah, in all fairness to Oxford Innovation, that wasn't part of the brief.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thanks for that, Councillor Horler. Have you worked with other similar projects to Springboard elsewhere, and have they been able to develop successfully by altering their operating model? And depending on what option is preferred moving forward, will you still play an advisory role in any part of the process?
So we obviously manage a number of centres, some of which we have taken over from other operators. So there's a couple of examples I think that we've included within some of the tables within the report. So we currently manage 2 centres on behalf of Stockport Metropolitan Borough Council in Greater Manchester. We've been running one of those centres in Stockport for over 7 years, and when we took it on, I would characterise it as being in a very similar situation to Springboard. So it was running really as a managed workspace by another operator. There was no business support offer. Previously, business support had been provided by the University of Manchester, but that partnership had failed. And it had also, the fabric of the space could be characterised as being underinvested in. Through a public procurement process, we were appointed to be the new operator of the Innovation Centre, and we advised the council that a relatively small scale at that stage programme of refurbishment, rebranding and remarketing was required. We assisted them in raising some funding towards business support through the then ERDF funds that were available, and also provided a schedule of refurbishment and rebranding and remarketing. That was done 7 years ago, and we have then continued to manage that centre since then. And if you look on, let me just find which page it is. I did mark it down, actually. There's a table on page in section 7.3, pricing strategy, which shows you the increase in pricing that we've achieved at the Stockport Centre over that 7 years. We've also entirely changed the nature of the companies that are occupying. So when we first took over that centre, we had a lot of, whilst very good local small businesses, we had a lot of care-based companies, gas fitters, carpet fitters, plumbing companies, not typically the sorts of companies that you would expect to see within an innovation ecosystem based centre. And that has entirely changed, and we now have a large community of creative and digital and IT type businesses based in there. And we've also just gone through a procurement process and re-tendered for that contract, and again been awarded a further contract to manage that centre, plus another innovation centre for that local authority. That's one example. We have a few others that where we have taken over similar spaces and have affected a change process about in terms of the fabric of the building, the operation and management of the building, but also then the commercial outcomes of that building. That building is now not a cost to the council on a annual basis. It is now in a break-even position. It's not an overnight fix. It's, you know, it's not without challenges. It's not something that's happened quickly. It's been a long-term process, but we have now got that centre into a place that the council is content with. I'm happy to answer any questions about specifically what we have done at that or any other centres ourselves. In terms of our role going forward, we obviously are aware of the procurement requirements for a local authority, and any position that we might take either in long term or short term would be requiring us to potentially bid competitively for that, but we would be very happy to do that if that was appropriate.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Hall.
With the Innovation Centre at FL and Newport, plus the development of the Innovation Hub at Medi Park, will there be sufficient demand to sustain Springboard in the long term?
Well, I mean, it's almost impossible to predict demand in the future. What we can do is talk about what we see in terms of typical demand from SMEs for this type of space. It's very difficult for companies starting up and trying to grow. We know that. It's very difficult to navigate and find the right support. We do know, though, that where we provide business support, that it is in demand from companies and it's a real attractor for space. We also know that companies prefer flexibility. We know that they prefer transparent pricing, and we know that they like to be in an environment where it is supportive and they are with like-minded companies and peers. So I think if you get the offer right, what we have seen elsewhere is that demand is there, but it's almost impossible to predict. Particularly, the current economic climate is incredibly volatile. It's incredibly uncertain. I think all of those things play to companies often, reflecting on their cost base. The cost of living crisis is making companies think about every single cost line that they have. I think that, it therefore is, you will always have cyclical demand, and it's almost impossible to say with 100% certainty that there is demand. I think you have to look back, though, at historical performance and say that when Springboard was operating as a fully functioning innovation incubation centre, that occupancy was very good, and we believe that if you get the offer of this Springboard right, that demand will be there for it.
Thank you.
That's great, thanks for that. Councillor Gordon?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As you may know, sort of several councillor members of the committee went to visit Springboard last week, and I'd like to thank the staff there for hosting us, and they were very clearly very passionate about the space and the work that they do there. But my question essentially, Joe, is, and I think you've answered it to an extent, looking at the sort of length of occupancy, the average length of occupancy, and some of the length of time that a couple of businesses have been there, and we're talking sort of more than a decade.
Yeah.
Has the Innovation Centre become more of a serviced office space rather than an innovation centre, if you like?
Yeah, I believe completely it has. And look, you know, there's absolutely nothing wrong with serviced office provision. You know, it provides a very valuable potentially next step from a business innovation incubation centre, but that wasn't the original purpose of Springboard. And typically managed or serviced office spaces don't deliver the economic development outcomes that you as a local authority would want to see in terms of business startup, business growth, jobs created, GVA, etc. So, you know, whilst serviced and managed office provision is very valuable in a rounded sort of office and growing economy, I don't believe that that's the purpose that Springboard was set up, and it probably isn't something you would use as an economic development intervention as a local authority. It's not the role of the local authority to provide serviced office space, but it potentially is the role of a local authority to provide economic development intervention to enable business births, survival and growth.
Chair, I've got a supplementary, if I may.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Thank you. Just on the sort of final points you were making there about the sort of the growth economy and innovative economy. I'm at the risk of putting you on the spot a little bit, Joe, so my apologies. Which of the options in the report do you believe best contribute to that sort of innovative growth economy?
It's difficult because we obviously have to balance what's achievable with, you know, which is the best option. From my experience, and I'm going to speak very candidly, local authorities and the mechanisms of local authorities are not particularly suited to working directly in a commercial environment. So the companies the SMEs that are operating, hopefully from Springboard, need nimble, quick, commercially minded approaches to support them in terms of their sort of commercial offering. So, you know, if they need something, typically by the time they're asking for it, they need it almost immediately. And in my experience, local authority mechanisms aren't well suited to that. So that's why you see up and down the country local authorities outsourcing entirely the operation of similar innovation or incubation spaces. Now, I would potentially say that's how we make our living. So, you know, I'll take any criticism of that you like. I guess what we've tried to do in looking at this is therefore balance the situation that in Torfine with, you know, potential commercial capital revenue requirements. What I would say about Springboard is that unusually you have an incredibly positive, strong entrepreneurial team there. Now, that's not often the case. You know, quite often what we see in terms of a staff team in a comparable centre elsewhere is a team that are going through the motions, not really entrepreneurial, not really enthusiastic and motivated to operate in the way that the SMEs might need. That's not the case here. And that's why we felt that actually a viable option was for that existing staff team to have the support of a commercial entity who could therefore help them drive the changes that might be needed in mindset and approach, and that might present challenges to you as a council, but actually I think that challenge might be welcome and might be something that as a council you could take up. So I do think on this occasion that option C3, with a trusted partner to enable that team to ask the right questions of the council, which might present challenge, is a viable option. And I say that knowing that, you know, that is an option that might not work elsewhere. But I think in this case, given the staff team and given the fact that the council is looking hard at, you know, what are the options for Springboard, and I believe has an underlying objective to get this back to being a fully functioning incubation and innovation centre, I think with that will on both sides that is a viable option. And also, you know, whilst it might not deliver perhaps the biggest commercial return, is the one that potentially is, in terms of a return on investment and capital and revenue support, is perhaps the most suitable one, given the resources and funding that you might have available to you. I don't know if that's an outright answer. I think
it's an extremely candid response, and I'm grateful for it. So, I mean, there's two things here, isn't it? It's not just sort of the innovation centre itself turning a profit, which would be lovely, but there's also the wider impacts on employment, you know, employment and growth and sort of entrepreneurial spirit and growing the sort of local economy in Torbein. So thank you. It's a very comprehensive answer. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks for that, Councillor Gordon. Just before I bring Councillor Hall in, just wondered if any of our officers wanted to respond to what Oxford Innovation said about that last question.
I'm happy to, Chair. I think this is the whole purpose of us looking at this in terms of the delivery model. I think as officers we remain open to exploring all the options to seek what, you know, but aligning. I think we're, you know, my own personal view is, and I think I speak on behalf of all the team, that we are aligning this as part of the economy and skills strategy, which this scrutiny did a lot of work on in the last administration, in terms of driving forward that innovation ecosystem. We want to drive forward the Torbein economy. We want to try and create growth and good jobs. And yes, whilst we recognise the challenges that Springboard are in, I think, you know, listening to what Joe was saying about the strength of the team, to build on that and to harness on that, I think key questions, and there's one for members to consider: appetite for risk and commerciality. Councillor Thomas, we've had some exciting conversations about that in other areas. What is our balance of risk, particularly in light of financial pressures, which we know are coming? So I think this is the challenge which we really appreciate the members' perspective on, to help us then. I said we've got 7 or 8 options on the table. We can't do in-depth modelling on 7 or 8. So if there was a preferred couple, what would those be to then help us drive us forward? I think, though, our absolute is our commitment to growth, supporting jobs, and then finding the right purpose for that building. And then our role then is to orchestrate that path, whatever that decision may be. I hear what Joe is saying about sort of like option C3, you know, using our existing team is amazing. You know, if our team are that good and just requires some steerage and a different appetite to risk, you know, then that's a different conversation. So I think, you know, this is early stages, and, you know, listening to experts and people who've run them elsewhere is exactly what we should be. I know, you know, Gaynor and Dawson have been to multiple of these centres over the time, and let's be honest, Springboard is lasting a hell of a lot longer than some of the other centres that were set up around Wales some time ago. So it's not all doom and gloom, but it is, I think, definitely a time for a refresh. And just picking up on Councillor Haller's question earlier about the link to the Medi Park and the proposed innovation hub, that is just, I think, a proposal. It's still at strategic outline case days. And we potentially, I would suggest, if we got Springboard up and running and on a really good, viable way forward, if anything, that shows the demonstration that we can then do that to help bring forward our ambitions for a Medi Park with further innovation in the county, would how I would see that trajectory running forward.
Thank you very much for that, Rachel. I think that was very positive from the council's point of view. So thanks for that. Councillor Horler?
Yeah, I reiterate the comments that you've just made. But my question now is, although the location terms of the regional market is considered throughout the report, what physical location of the building was taken into consideration in the terms of the accessibility? Does the distance from public transport points make an impact on the location? Yeah.
I'll pick that one up. You've got to look at the history of how Springboard came about. At the time, it was a wish of the council to get into business incubation and business innovation centres. As per normal, capital funding was at a premium, and partners were sought. And the partnership that came through was one with the WDA at the time, who had a design for the building that is Springboard on the shelf, and they owned that land there as well, and that was one of the big drivers for it going there. At the time, if you looked at the way business incubation centres were going, they were going outside of town centres, outside of city centres, and they were going on to industrial parks, or they were part of science parks. Right, so at the time, it was the fit with the thinking of that time. Also, if you look where Springboard is, where the car park is for the police station, that actually had planning permission for a mirror building of Springboard, so it would have been a U instead of an L, with larger units in to grow the business into. And you've got the pavilions on the Lantern Park, and that was the grow-on space from there. Typically, because of the way funding works, etc., when the grow-on space was built first, then we came along, and then the interim never got done. Right, so current thinking now with regards to if you were starting with a clean piece of paper is town centres, is on easily accessible by public transport. But that's the way thinking has moved in the last 20 years. So it's a difficult one. Would you build Springboard where it is now for that kind of model? Possibly not. One of the aspirations when it was first built was to be a flagship for entrepreneurial activity within the borough. It evolved away from that. All right? And being accessible to people through public transport was most probably one of the big drivers for that to happen. So in answer to your question, of its time, it was the right place. 20 years worth of hindsight, it most probably isn't.
Can I ask a supplementary on this one?
Yes. Yeah.
On our visit last week, if I remember rightly, it's a long time away since last week, we discussed the fact that you had an area for bicycles and you also had a shower room on site. How many people actually come in using the bikes instead of vehicles nowadays?
The honest answer to that is I don't know, but I will tell you it's not many,
right, thank you.
if any at all.
Okay, but it's there for those people that want to use it. Great, thank you.
Right.
That's great, thanks for that. And I can see Joe's wants to come in.
Thank you. I was just going to make the point that actually what we've seen post-COVID is that where we operate centres in the sort of more traditional out-of-town locations, they've actually, if anything, fared better than some of the city centre locations that have required people to use public transport. So I think as we come out of a pandemic environment, or maybe not, maybe I'm being too optimistic there, but people have been more reluctant to be using public transport. Now, obviously, that's not necessarily a good thing, but I don't think that at the moment that we're seeing that an out-of-town location is necessarily a negative thing. I think the other bit, to just back to your point about where we considered as sort of comparable locations, one of the clear benefits of the location of Springboard is its proximity to the M4 and therefore connectivity to Cardiff and Bristol. And I think if you look at a number of the occupiers in the centre, the fact that it's equidistant between the two, there or thereabouts, is actually a positive thing. We have seen interest from businesses coming out of Bristol to be based in Springboard, partly because of wanting to be based in Wales, but also because it is that connection between Bristol and Cardiff. So I do think that whilst everything that Dawson said about perhaps you would consider more town centre, city centre locations now if you were developing, I don't necessarily think the location is as negative a point as it might be seen to be, accepting that there aren't great public transport links, which would be it would be better if there were good public transport links, but I don't necessarily think it's entirely a negative location.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So I'd like to invite our officers now to take some of our questions, and obviously guests from Oxford Innovation, you're welcome to chip in at any point. We'll have the first question from Councillor Gordon, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This question kind of builds on previous questions to an extent, but I was wondering whether at the inception or during the life of the Innovation Centre, whether there's been kind of a mission statement, if you like, of the aims and objectives they're trying to achieve there. Because this drift, or my personal feeling, and I think of some of the other members of the committee, this drift towards a service office space, does that align to any kind of mission statement that might have been in place, and whether and how we measure success in terms of the businesses that are incumbent and have moved on? Where's the benchmark? Where's the checks and balances of the success then of those businesses going forward? Thank you.
I hope I'm going to say what Dawson was going to say now. I think, Councillor Gordon, that I think what you said is a fair reflection on what I like Joe has called the drift. In terms of, since my time here, and this is why I'm looking at Dawson, that very clear mission, business plan, I think is a fair reflection. We haven't had, and that's ended up with what we are today. In terms of me giving a justification for this, now I, started in 2017, almost 2018, so it was at the end of the year. And I think it's fair to say that the team had been, if anybody has to look what had happened to the team over that decade preceding me joining, it was significant shrinkage of the size of the team as we went through periods of austerity. And therefore, priorities change, focus change. And, and Dawson is nodding because that you can't look at Springboard in its isolation. It's got to be part of that wider strategy at that time. And I think that's sort of like one of the biggest contributing factors, because as the report is very honest, we have restructured the team to cut our cloth accordingly, which means that the team is not just the business innovation team working on transition with the university to get clients in and then get clients out to get new clients in. They're doing a whole load of other things in terms of business support for our existing businesses in other places across the council as well, because we're trying to deliver as much as we can, but with the cloth that we've got. And that's not any criticism, because all of our services have had budget reductions and have had that same approach. I think what this now means is that's why we've ended up here today, why we're keen to readdress that. I think with the refocus of the economy and skills strategy has enabled us to say, right, what is its mission, what is its purpose, what is its business plan, and with also the new approach, I'm being honest with Steve and the new chief, I say call him the new chief exec, he's been here a year now, he's not new now. The chief exec is bringing in terms of business planning, the project management and absolute, delivery, that's where we're looking to reset this against that. But I think, it's a fair question in terms of the drift that's been experienced.
Thank you, Rachel, for that. Councillor Gordon, your second question, please.
Yeah, supplementary question. I agree with everything you said about the staff team and reiterate my comments I made earlier. They are fantastic people, and there's loads of anecdotal stuff in the report about one of the sort of members of staff. They're out there gritting the car park in poor weather and whatever. So they do really go the extra mile. Well, my question is, should there be an annual budget for sort of building and facilities updates at the Innovation Centre? Because it's called the Innovation Centre, and quite frankly, some of the facilities are looking a little bit tired. And if we're at the cutting edge of technology, things like a VPN network, is there facilities for that, or a budget in place, or should there be a budget in place for those sorts of things to keep the building up to spec, if you like?
I think, Councillor Gordon, we'd love one. I can categorically say, because I can see Dawson and Gaynor, the answer is no, there isn't. I think, again, if I go back to those 2012, 2013, 2014 days, the first thing that always seemed to fall off people's budgets was just that proactive maintenance, just because the scale of the cuts that were experienced at that time. It's come back to bite us in terms of those decisions, and that. But Torvine's not unique. That this is nationwide. As with my budget pressures hat on, I would say yes, I'd love to have that budget, but at the consequence of what then going. Yes, an investor save model is great, but our reserves are only so deep, as Nigel would have me say. They can only be used once. And on something like this, it's then that payback and that confidence to achieve that. So yes, we'd love to have a budget. No, there isn't one. If there is to be a budget to be proposed through the budget process, I then have to find that budget from somewhere, which means a cut elsewhere.
Yeah, go on, Dawson.
There's been a lot of talk around how the mission and the purpose of Springboard has drifted, and how it's gone from an incubation centre into basically service office. I think we all recognise that. But a lot of that was down to the budget drive, right? Because we were looking at the budgets across the whole council, right? So what Springboard needed to do, it needed to be filled, right? And that was part of the reason why clients weren't helped to move on and into different spaces. That's part of the drive why they were put into multiple occupancy, right? Because, in all fairness, austerity was something that came right across our lives in local government, in public service, full stop. And that was one of the big things. So please don't think I'm knocking austerity as a concept. That's not my job. I have to react to what's going on at the time. And, in all fairness, Rachel has explained that pretty well. But I think that needs to be said, that when money becomes the priority and saving money becomes the priority, like it did, then things like Springboard happen because your priorities are different. Yeah. It becomes about money rather than economic drivers. And Springboard is at a real crossroads now, right? There's an opportunity to do something really, really good with Springboard. And that's what I've taken from the review that Oxford Innovation has done. Right? And that's why it's nice to sit in front of people like yourselves, so that you can see those opportunities as well, that I feel that are there. But that budget, the money has been a big factor in the way Springboard and where Springboard is now. Has it been underinvested in? Yes. But what would you have done differently at that time? And the answer is most probably very little. You know, there were priorities in this council that, you know, that are different. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not but that's why my belief is why Springboard is now.
Thank you for that, Dawson. I thank you for your honesty there. That's been really helpful. Joe?
I was just going to make a point that I mean we've seen similar situations up and down the country. So I think and we ourselves actually there have been a number of times in our history where the commercial realities mean that you have to make choices about what's most important, the objectives of a space, or being able to continue to run it, and the commercial realities. So I don't think that's anything that is necessarily unique here. I think what we've tried to do in modelling the different options is get to a point where Springboard would be financially sustainable without ongoing intervention from budgets from the council. So looking towards a point where the costs of the ongoing planned and preventative maintenance and reactive maintenance required at Springboard could be factored in within the operating profit and loss of the centre. So that's where we have, in our modelling, that's the assumption we've made, is that over a period of time, with some capital investment now, which I realise you would need to find budget for, in the longer term, there is a possibility to get to a point where actually the budget that's required to maintain that standard could be covered by the operating income from the centre. And that's really the sort of best practice model now that innovation centres up and down the country are trying to achieve. There isn't ongoing revenue support in most places for centres like this, and therefore what you try to achieve is at least a sustainable position, even if it's not positively contributing to the council. It can get to a point where it's not an ongoing cost.
Okay, thanks for that, Chair. Joe, I'm the Chair. I am obviously conscious of the time. I see Councillor Gordon, and you have a question you want to ask, but once you've done that, can you just move on to your next question as well then, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just very briefly then, I don't want anybody to think for a second we're sort of punching holes into why measures were taken sort of during austerity to sort of try to fill up the occupancy rates and all the rest of it. Nobody's scoring points on that for a second. There's no bigger critic than the ideological carnage of austerity than myself. Joe, just coming back on that sort of self-sustaining piece where the annual sort of maintenance budget and facilities budget can be so it can watch its face and generate its own steam. What scenario, what option lends itself, or what options lend itself to that scenario where it's able to watch its face in terms of maintenance and facilities because of the sort of occupancy rates and all the rest of it? And if I can blend that in with my next question, if you allow me. Option B, the financial forecast indicate a potential loss situation with break-even occupancy forecasted at 92%. Do we think 92% would be an achievable occupancy forecast in order to improve on a break-even position? The current occupancy is around 60%, and I think pre-COVID it hovered around 80-85%. So if 92 is a break-even, what's the sort of prospects of having that really high occupancy, bearing in mind the sort of innovation centres low, in other areas that have been mentioned earlier in this scrutiny?
So I'll caveat all of this just by saying we obviously haven't done, and I think we've been clear, we haven't done a full condition survey. And therefore, one of our recommendations is that a full condition survey is done. So any assumptions we've made about the fabric and infrastructure of the building need to just sort of take that into account. Our belief is that any of the options under C, stream C, could get to a point where they are financially sustainable. I think the do nothing, it's going to continue to be a cost to the council, and it is not therefore something that is really viable in terms of council budgets, potential calls on budgets, and future possible austerity. I think any of the C options, though, could provide that. I mean, it's difficult to say, but I do think there is scope to get to a sustainable position. 92% is a very high break-even point. I'm not going to hide that. If we were operating a centre and the break-even position was 92%, that would cause us some concern. However, 92% is a level of occupancy that is achievable. We typically in an innovation centre that is, has been operating for more than 2 or 3 years, we would see average occupancy fluctuating, and clearly you expect it to fluctuate because what you want is churn of companies moving through. We expect occupancy to fluctuate somewhere between 85 and 95%. You do get to a point, and we have a number of centres operating at 100%, but that brings about its own challenges. I think the critical thing is that occupancy is sitting at 60%, probably because it's not a very differentiated in-demand offer at the moment. Its occupancy is driven by providing an environment for businesses that they want to be in, that has support, networks, peers around them, and is a vibrant, thriving community of businesses. And whilst Springboard has a lot of great businesses in there at the moment, my own experience of visiting there is that it's lots of closed doors. There isn't a lot of interaction. There isn't a lot of sense of community. There isn't anything that drives businesses to want to be there. And therefore that will always suppress demand. So I think if you can get the offer right, 92% isn't an unreasonable occupancy expectation. I don't think it's an easy or quick overnight thing to get to that point, but I do think it's possible, and that once you get to that level, you can maintain it within those bounds of, you're always going to have churn because you want companies to be coming in and out, and the community to be constantly regenerating as companies go out the top by being successful and new ones come in at the bottom. I think the other thing is, it's possible to run some specific programmes to drive that demand as well. So in a number of places we run specific business startup or business incubation or accelerator type programmes that can actually encourage business formation and therefore drive you can grow some of that demand yourself. And those would be some of the options that I think it would be worth looking at. Particularly, if we do go into a recession type environment and other businesses are, making people redundant, we often see business startups growing at that point, and that can give actually business incubation and innovation centres a ready community of people who would like to start up a business but perhaps don't know how to do it or need support to do it, and therefore business innovation and incubation centres can be ideally placed to capitalise on that.
Thank you. I think, one of the things we'll have to wrestle with, I think, as a sort of committee is taking on board Rachel's very valid points about budgetary pressures and all the rest of it, and the stuff that you've just said about, investing a little bit, there's a speculate to accumulate scenario I think we're going to have to grapple with. But I'm grateful for your comprehensive response, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, yeah, go ahead, Gav.
If I just come in there briefly, Chair, just to say that I think at Annex 2 of the papers that have been circulated, there's some cost modelling that attempts to show the payback period for the investment that's been proposed within the Oxford Innovation Report, the capital investment, and taking into account the current budget that Springboard operates around, and what that payback period would look like. So just, as Rachel has said, there's some further work to be done, but in terms of trying to give members a feel for how long it would take to recoup the investment. That information is in the report. Thanks.
That's great. Thanks for that, Gav. A question on option B, a small budget for marketing. Have we given consideration to a significant budget allocation for marketing to ensure that we give an impression of a futuristic space to base an, I hate this word, innovative business? The online presence is poor and does not reflect the forward-thinking nature of this project, so therefore will not attract enough of the right clientele. So can this be improved as a priority?
I think, Chair, again, it's linked to the recommendations we've, and it'd be, if there's the desire to increase the budget, then it would go through the budget pressures process, which we're currently working through as officers.
And if I can just add to that, there's some work going on around the business engagement framework. We talked about one-stop shop at our last scrutiny meeting. Right. So there's some work going on around that and how we engage with businesses. And part of that work is looking at what we're doing with regards to promote Springboard, what we're looking at with the branding, how we're going to take those kind of things forward. So that work is actually in hand. The actual budget part about it, if you said to me, can you have some more budget for marketing? I say, yes, of course I could. But we have to be realistic about it as well. In all fairness, I feel we got as much as can be afforded. So I'm not going to knock the budget part of it, but that work is in hand, okay?
As well, Chair, just also as part of Shared Prosperity Fund, we have also bid for an innovation ecosystem work stream for funding to come forward as well. Now we're waiting on decisions, of which then that could then be put in the mix and with Springboard as a central part of that. And it is all part of that world. And I want to say it's 200 to 300,000 that we've bid for over 3 years as well for Shared Prosperity, specifically linked to this part of the strategy. So it's not that we haven't not done anything. We're trying to find other sources as well. Lovely,
thank you for that, Rachel. Councillor Horler.
Rachel, I guess this one's for you. Cons of limited capital availability internally. Could there be delays on implementation so grants sought are suitable grants available, and how confident are we that a grant should be secured, and what are the long-term risks associated with the grant funding for this purpose? That's a lot of words in a lot of sentences.
Yeah,
but basically, how you
so
can...
basically, is there grant funding available,
Yes.
and what's the risks to the model
Yeah, and what are the
at
risks?
the moment?
Sure.
Yeah, that's fine, Councillor Horler. I think, we've been very honest in the report. Because of this options assessment, we haven't bid into Shared Prosperity Fund for the capital for Springboard. At that time, it felt, given where we were with SPF, when we had member seminars in June, if we remember, it was sort of like we hadn't had the report yet. We were working it all through. Now, Shared Prosperity is just one stream. If we are very clear on the way forward and ambitions, part of the next stage then on the options assessment would then be that more in-depth work to see what other grants are available, what is coming forward from Welsh Government, Cardiff Capital Region. If this stacks up and pays it back, there is, because Cardiff Region do not do grants. It's an evergreen, it's meant to pay back. But, this is where the next stage options assessment would be, what grants are available, how quick could they come, what risk are they? So I think at this stage it's too soon. With regards to the Council's capital programme, it is incredibly constrained. There is not growth forecast in that. I think, Nigel was very happy when the report says, we recognise the constraints on the existing core capital programme. That is a member's choice. But again, that always goes back to, well, what is going to give? Because there's not a forecast growth of the Council's capital programme. So I think we recognise we'd be looking for grant or loan or something thereof based on the business modelling moving forward. But, it is a risk. But so is the risk of not doing anything at the moment either.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks for that. Okay, so option C, dependent upon the terms negotiated, sub-options C1, C2 and C4 are likely to result in Torfaen County Borough Council giving up a day-to-day management of the facility. What are the advantages and disadvantages of giving up the day-to-day management?
Yeah, as Joe alluded to earlier in the conversation, there are lots of innovation centres that are managed by outside contractors that take things forward. You negotiate the terms of the contracts and you put the economic outputs as part of that, but you don't have any control over it. But with ours, and I'm so pleased to hear what Joe said about the team down at Springboard. Right, there is a real will to make this work. There's a real pleasure within that team to see companies grow and actually create jobs for people in Torfaen. That's what really drives them. So, I feel that the team have so much to contribute towards the future of Springboard that they take it outside of the team's sphere of influence might not be the right decision. Let me phrase it like that. But no, there are advantages. The advantages are we don't employ the team. We don't have to cover the costs, etc. Right? But the disadvantages are that you would have redundancies, or you could have redundancies off the back of that kind of model. Yeah. Right? So there are a lot of downsides. But I think the biggest downside is that you would lose the focus of the team that we already have, which I'm very proud of.
I also think just particularly on those options where it is outsourced, we have to remember that the council still would have to have an intelligent client role. So you still need to have expertise within the council. Because what's often happened, particularly when you're looking at budget cuts, that's outsourced, that'll manage itself. And then that's how then you get drift and loss of strategy. So that intelligent client role of an outsourced model and keeping expertise still in the council, keeping on top of where the industry is going, what is best practice. So each time you tender, you're able to do, or you want to do a full options assessment again, you've got that capacity and expertise in-house to be able to draw on that expertise. And I think that's just something you always have to bear in mind with those options, C options. There is still a cost to the council for that intelligent client function.
Thanks for that, Rachel. Just quick, sorry. Just going back to Dawson, I mean, nobody can question the passion that has been shown by your team down at Springboard is immense. And I want to say that out loud, that you can clearly see that there's huge amounts of passion at Springboard. And Joe, can I bring you in now?
Thank you. I was just going to, in a way, reiterate some of what Rachel has just said, actually. I mean, where we run outsourced operations on behalf of a local authority, it's not completely arm's length. So, we have regular review meetings, both our central head office team and the local centre staff. Those happen typically at least monthly, if not more often. And it really is invaluable where you have got an intelligent client and where what we're trying to achieve as the outsourced operator feeds really closely and is really closely aligned with the economic development outputs and objectives of that local authority. So although it might seem that it's, it's a way to be, not involved, actually it's a way for the council to get those outputs without having to be, dedicating resource itself 100% of the time. So what you get is an operator who is solely focused on delivering the outcomes. As Dawson said, you would end up with typically in a fully outsourced model, you'd have a very, very detailed management agreement. I mean, those agreements are beasts often in terms of, the obligations and objectives that we have to deliver, the KPIs that are set. We are solely focused on making sure that each of the centres that we run for a local authority delivers those. I suppose what you get in terms of a benefit is we have a central head office team of circa 20 people, all of whom, all they do all day is run innovation centres. So we bring specific industry expertise. We have links into the industry that perhaps it's easier for us to maintain than a local authority. So you get, the very latest in terms of expertise, knowledge and insight about the industry without having to maintain that yourselves as a local authority. But there clearly are, there are issues associated with it in terms of you don't have complete 100% control on a day-to-day basis. Every decision's made, but you can build into the agreement, the boundaries within which your operator can operate. What I would just say on the point about staffing, undoubtedly TUPE arrangements would potentially apply. So yes, whilst there may be issues around staffing, any operator coming in and taking over the centre now would clearly have constraints around, that existing staff team and potentially TUPE applying. So there are protections in place that mean that an unscrupulous operator couldn't come in and just make all of the staff team redundant. Although obviously there are ways in which you can restructure, and therefore there might be some impact. But I think there are, within option C, there are varying degrees of outsourcing, if you like. And option C3, the council would retain full control under that. It would just be there, an operator being an advisor partner, as opposed to making clear decisions or having control over the operation. So I think it's varying degrees. There are obviously pros and cons of each model, but I think even within any outsourced model, the council would retain the ability to set objectives and KPIs to require the operator to deliver. There are usually mechanisms within any management agreement for termination of contracts if the operator is not delivering what the council requires. So I think you do still retain the ability to make decisions and have ultimate control.
Okay, thank you for that, Joe. Could I bring Gareth in, please?
Just briefly, thanks, Chair. Just to kind of echo some of the comments that have been made already from kind of personal past experience, performing that intelligent client role is quite time consuming and needs a degree of expertise in its own right. So I think that's not to be underestimated. Also, the outsourcing options, just going back to the point I mentioned earlier on about the financial profiling in Appendix 2, the payback period is longer because those options don't come without, as Joe mentioned, that level of expertise comes with a reasonably significant cost. So in terms of considering the options, there's a balance there between paying an external third-party organisation to provide those services as opposed to investing in resource that already sits within the local authority, building capacity within the team. As Dawson's mentioned, the team perform services, and I think this is not very widely recognised. The team provides services way beyond the boundaries of Springboard. They're effectively providing that economic development service across the county borough. So I think that's, in terms of the way in which that resource is invested, I think that's worthy of consideration. Thank you.
Thanks, Gareth. I'd just bring Dawson in, please.
I was just going to reiterate the point that Gareth said, is that the team is not dedicated to Springboard. So if you two-bait across, you would leave a big hole in the delivery of the economy and skills strategy. And the innovation ecosystem is a big strand in that economy and skills strategy. So there would be other issues to be resolved as well if that was the chosen route.
Yeah. Just bring Gaynor in, please.
I know I've been quiet up until now. Speaking as the team, it's delightful to hear that people can really see the passion that we have down there. And the team, any job, if you really enjoy your job and really believe in it, and we certainly do believe in Springboard and the future of Springboard, and given the tools and the support, we believe we can get that occupancy back up and build that community. So thank you ever so much for your really kind words, because that does go a long way. A pat on the back is quite nice. But, obviously C3 is the most attractive to us because it gives us support. As Dawson and Rachel and Gaff has already said, we are not just Springboard. So we deal with inward investment, and our existing businesses within Torvine. So we've got a very wide range of skills, but sadly there's very few of us. We're small and perfectly formed, shall we say. The passion is definitely there, and the drive and the community spirit and the future of our imagination of bringing businesses in and developing Springboard. Springboard is a fantastic building, and it just needs waking from its slumber at the minute. It needs to be brought up into, and I understand with austerity and with still restraints on money, but, it'd be nice to be able to get our teeth into it again, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Gaynor. Speaking as a business owner, I'm not a huge fan of outsourcing at all. So I'll just put that one out there. And again, I'll say again that you can clearly see the passion from the team down at Springboard. So if I bring in Councillor Gordon now with the next question, please.
Another not a big fan of outsourcing here, full disclosure. The options C1 and C2 says in the body of the report, capital investment and works required may take time to source and implement. How confident are we that we can secure capital funding under options C1 and C2?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Gordon. I think this links on to a question earlier from Councillor Horler. I think, as I said, the report does identify that we recognise the constraints on the existing council's capital programme. That's not to say I won't go and ask for some, but recognise that's members' choice through the budget process. And I do fully acknowledge the pressures that I've got, even on, for example, highways maintenance, etc. So I think, as I said, we'd look at what the preferred options were to then take forward for modelling, and part of that consideration of decisions would be accessibility to grant or funding as they emerge. As I think I listed off a few earlier, but I think it's fair to say we haven't done that big trawl of what is possible or available. And it's a changed environment for us now, because we don't just look to Cardiff, we do look to Westminster, which probably we haven't ever explored before in terms of funding. I don't just mean levelling up and shared prosperity. So, I think that would be our next stage as part of the business case modelling, to do further work in terms of grant or loan.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that, Rachel. Okay, so staying on C3 for a second, Council would enter into a commercial partnership with a third-party operator with expertise in business innovation field, and of successfully running and managing and innovation spaces. Are there third-party operators in the market to choose from, or will it be a very specialised and limited pool? What process would we go through to selecting a suitable third-party operator?
It's a procurement exercise, Councillor. That's how we bring these services in. So we would have to put what the requirements out there, and we would have to see what bids come in and score them accordingly. So it's a pure procurement exercise.
Thank you.
If that was the preferred way forward, you lay the ground first, you'd have demonstration days, soft market days, be inviting potential bidders in to see, to talk to them. You do that actually ahead of the procurement exercise, so you understand that what you're putting out to the market is what they also want to receive and think is commercially viable. You don't always take on everything they say, but what it does allows you to have that pre-conversation, because once you're into procurement, you can't have those soft conversations, but you can have them in the development of the procurement documentation, because then you're giving all parties, you have bidder days, you open yourself up for conversation, you just advertise it out. There are operators in the field, we're obviously talking to one today, but there are other operators out in the market, which again, appreciate Oxford Innovation have done this work for us, but as I said, that would be again part of that bigger business case, an options assessment, or feasibility, I suppose, assessment undertaken in more detail when we're doing a full options assessment once we've narrowed the number down.
Okay, thanks for that, Rachel. Councillor Gordon with the next question, please.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, my question runs on from Councillor Thomas's. In C3, it says, timescale to run the procurement exercise needs to be considered and the cost of commercial partnering arrangements. So the question is there the potential that the costs of commercial partnering arrangements become prohibitive and means this preferred option couldn't be progressed? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of partnering with a third-party operator?
Happy to pick that one up. So the costs of the option C3 have been kind of looked at. The cost of a commercial partnering arrangement is going to be significantly less than a pure outsourcing model. So in terms of the numbers that we've looked at, yes, there's a cost, but it's not hugely significant in the overall scheme of things. It would probably be limited to a year or so's worth of initial investment, and the aim and objective of that piece of work, that kind of procured service, would be to, during that period, to work with the existing very passionate and energised resource that we have at Springboard to embed those skills, improve the processes, boost the marketing, repositions Springboard in the market. So that would be the objective of the piece of work, and to some extent those are the benefits that would accrue from that. And the longer term benefit is obviously that resource then is, as I said, embedded within the team. And we have that expertise within Torvine, not through a third party, for everything that we want to do moving forward in terms of developing that wider innovation ecosystem that we've talked about in terms of the economy and skills strategy and the fit within the wider city region and the Western Gateway. So I hope that answers the question.
Well, thanks for that, Gav. Councillor Horner.
This is my last question, and I'm going to ask Gaynor. Already. So over the years, I've visited Springboard many times on events. I've always enjoyed the appearance. The colour is a little bit sterile, but the maintenance and the cleanliness and the age of the building is highly commended for the work that you put into the building on the long term. We visited last week and we saw the furniture looking as good as it did 17 years ago, so I recommend that. But I live in a colourful world and I still think it's a bit sterile. However, my question, Gaynor, beyond TBC, the nearest compatible innovation facilities are at Ebbvale, the Innovation Centre, and Newport Market. What will set us apart from other innovation centres, and what would be Springboard's USP?
That's a nice, easy one then. Thank you for that. I too believe in colour and vibrancy, and I think we need to put our personality into Springboard, the vibrancy of it. Updating of the IT, we need to do, because we've got the facility there, but we need to update because everything's just ticked along, so we need to invest in the IT and the actual connectivity of the centre. But I think there's lots of USP that can be brought into this, and I think it's built around the service that we can provide, the business support, the ecosystem, the community spirit of the businesses in there, because they are now starting to come out of their caves for a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and a biscuit, and then actually having regular reviews with them. So we're not interrogating them, but we're there to aid them, assist them, and bring the expertise in through our networks. So we've always been very driven with Torvine, with any of our businesses, that it's not about just giving a phone number across. It's about actually putting all these elements together. So if we're talking to a business on their regular review, or just even over a cup of coffee, we can actually pull all those elements to help that business go forward. And there's certain things that, with the shared prosperity funding that we have looked at, which hopefully we'll get funding for. So, for instance, a virtual incubator, which will be online, a pitch event, soft landing for businesses looking so they can come in for 3 months, funded, and we can get that opportunity of support. So, for us, I suppose our US is actually the actual support that we can build around Springboard. That's our heart, that's our firm solid, that it's actually the vibrancy and the support we can bring to that business. Whether they're low maintenance, high maintenance, whatever their requirements are, we always believe in helping them forward. And, as I think somebody said, we do have pleasure from seeing them succeed.
Good. Thank you.
Just to say, one of the things, this is why this review is so important, is that the services we offer have to be right. They have to be what the client wants, right? And you look at USP, I go back to when I did my 20 years in banking. I sold similar products to everybody else on the high street, and the USP was me. And I think that's one of the strong things that Springboard has. And that's not me, that's the team, all right?
I take that on board, and I see that every single time I visit. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Horner. Okay, so on page 30, just looking at 6.1, it sets out financial considerations. But what are the year 1, 3 and 5 plans for those leading this project? Not only financially, but how Torvine, its residents and businesses will benefit. What's the clear goals on that? Yeah, that's fine. So on page 30, it's 6.1. It sets out the financial considerations. But what are the year 1, year 3 and 5-year plans for those leading this project? Not only financially, but how Torvine, its residents and businesses will benefit. Clear goals are needed to work towards.
Yes, so in terms of the non-financial, so the financial perspective is laid out in that annex. So you've got the payback periods there. So in terms of the team,
in terms of the wider benefits, I think that's when we start looking at, now I've got it in front of me and I can't say, the innovation ecosystem from the economy and skills strategy has a whole suite of measures about new starts that we want. We want targets on job creation, job growth, GVA in terms of gross value added. That's how the economy gets measured currently in terms of us trying to raise the prosperity of Torfaen, of which then what we need to do through the business case modelling is identify what part Springboard plays in that overall vision of growth and jobs creation.
I was just going to say that the role of Springboard is written very clearly in the economy and skills strategy. So it is achieving the economy and skills strategy. That's the overall driver for everything we do, and it's how we fit Springboard into there. Although financial considerations are important, you know, we are here to serve the people who live in Torfaen. So we have to make sure that that comes through very, very clearly. How we're going to do that, how we're going to assist them, how we're going to help people grow and have happy lives, which is what it's all about.
Thank you for that. We've got Councillor Gordon again now, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just interested in some sort of key stakeholder feedback. What feedback did you get from Torfaen Economic Forum, please? And perhaps as, or more important, what feedback did you get from the wonderful staff at Springboard?
What was I going to say? That's such a good sign, isn't it? I think so. In terms of the stakeholders, the Economic Forum, that was it. You know, the Economic Forum, I'm going to say, the economy and skills strategy was developed in partnership with the forum, not sort of like to the forum. They've been, you know, I'm being honest, considering that well, it only started 2018, really. 2017, just kicking off when I started, wasn't it, Dors? Yeah. You know, they recognise the role of that innovation piece to really help take forward the Torfaen economy. So that the feedback from the forum, I think, is very much similar to what's in this report. It's not meeting its needs now, it needs updating, but it has a value, a role, a place and a purpose to deliver what it is the council wants to deliver. And I think, Dors, you can cover the staff bit a bit more as well.
Yeah, and on the Economic Forum as well, there's an entrepreneurial subgroup to the Economic Forum, which I'm part of, and they have been instrumental in looking at what we're doing, as Rachel has said, and taking that forward. The report has been shared with all the staff down at Springboard Innovation Centre. They've all made comments. They've actually, to be able to pull that report together, they did a pest analysis on the report. They also did SWOT analysis on the options, and that's been considered in that report there. So the team have seen the report in its entirety and are au fait with what's in there.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gordon?
Yeah, I believe this is the last question. You'll all be thrilled to discover. On Appendix 1, looking at the table, even though C3 is the preferred option, this estimates that the average occupancy will only achieve 80%. Would 80% occupancy under operating model C3 be enough to generate a sustainable profit?
The answer to that is yes, and the financial modelling behind that, it will enable us to look at costs, it will enable us to look at getting a proper reflection on the services that's provided. So yeah, 80% will be sufficient, is the simple answer.
And I think I'm right as well, is that you never actually want 100%. Occupancy, because you want to be able to be flex. So if an opportunity comes, you can grab it quick and bring somebody in. And then you obviously then have that plan then, because you know then who should be going out in that plan, which Joe articulated so clearly. And I quite like the, you know, the birth, the growth and the development in terms of that transition through the business cycle. So that's why, you know, a modelling of what is proportionate and while still being ambitious, but also to have that. So you might have, like, you know, over a course of a year you want 80, but at one point you might have 70 or 90 because you want that churn and you want that flexibility to really grasp opportunities when they come.
Thank you for those responses. I think it's fair to say that yes, we wouldn't want 100% occupancy on too regular a basis, because that suggests some sort of stagnation, doesn't it? And there needs to be a churn. And I think the sort of objective of these type of innovation centres, and the one we've got, is to sort of move people onwards and upwards. And sort of our objective is to kick them out in a really positive way, so that they can continue to thrive on a bigger scale. But yeah, grateful for your answers. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Gordon. Gina?
With companies that we have had in Springboard for a number of years that have looked to grow and have outgrown Springboard, we actually work with them to actually find them suitable premises. You know, obviously we try and find somewhere in Torvine, but, you know, if it is outside Torvine for them to actually grow into, then that's fine as well. But we actually work with companies to actually find them appropriate office space for their next growth anyway. And that would be part of the review.
Gareth? Just briefly, at the other end of the scale of Gainer's comment, really, from past experience, again, on managing innovation centres, something like about 75 to 80% would be optimum in terms of the ability to have the flexibility that Rachel talked about. The worst case scenario is that you've got young entrepreneurial businesses that want to go into a facility like Springboard and can't because it's full. So in terms of a commercial property entity, yes, you'd want to try and maximise your occupancy and generate the highest level of rent, but you know, this is a different concept. So that's
it's a difference between what we want to create at Springboard to the managed office space that's been talked about earlier in the meeting.
And just in terms of that wider strategy, and you know, particularly for the new members, I'm talking like big strategy now. But in 2018-19, the council made a decision to review the LDP, and one of the key drivers for that was the landowners that we have in Torvine did not bring forward the sites we wanted for progression for employment land. That was one of the biggest reasons for the LDP review. Our ambitions in the preferred strategy are quite ambitious to bring forward more employment land. But again, this is just learning the lessons from the past, is having that economy and skills team completely side by side alongside that LDP team. So when we identify land for employment, we therefore then have a strategy to take forward to deliver that, and that's quite often in partnership with Welsh Government through discussions, but having that absolute synergy and that pathway through all the way from business idea to incubation at what Springboard would be into then, you know, either office or manufacturing or combination thereof, and that is definitely the aspiration and our plan very clearly in economy and skills strategy. Not only is Springboard in there, but absolute dedicated work streams on working with existing industrial landowners and employment, you know, so like say Plantarn Business Park, actually working with all the landowners on there. What are your plans? What's the ability to then have that strategy and that pathway through is definitely part of the work of which Springboard has to then be put in that context.
Okay, thank you for that, Rachel. That was the last of our questions. I will just want to ask Councillor Cowles if he's got any questions. I'm conscious that Councillor Cowles has been sat listening. Is there anything you want to add at all, Councillor Cowles?
No, thank you, Chair. Appreciate it. I think there was actually a question from Councillor Molson that hasn't been asked on her behalf. So I might just ask that one, which is about, have we taken on board feedback from staff?
Yeah, I think Dawson outlined how the staff have been engaged all throughout this. So I think that covered it.
Yeah, as I said, the report's been shared fully. Their views on all the options, etc., have been taken into consideration. As I said, they did a pest analysis, a SWOT analysis, so they've been fully involved in the process of bringing the report together. And, as I said, fully on board with what's been said.
Thank you. Other than that, Chair, I just want to thank all the officers and the people from Oxford Innovation for their really detailed answers. I found it a really, really productive session and a very, very, very informative session. So thank you, everyone.
That's great. Thank you for that, Councillor Kell. So, yeah, that is the end of our interrogation or questioning, whichever way you want to look at it. I'd like to thank everybody. I'd like to thank everybody for coming in, your officers and Oxford Innovation, and you are free to leave. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So, members, can I remind you that the meeting is still informal proceedings and therefore still being webcast. Members, can I refer you now to the scrutiny and activity and the key question and invite you to offer your recommendations. So we'll just hand over to Rebecca now, please.
Thank you, Chair. So obviously the purpose of the report today is to give you an overview of the options that have been put forward by Oxford Innovation. So members, would you like to put forward any recommendations on or your views on which of the preferred options? Obviously, as Rachel set out, there are 7, considering the 4 that fall under category C. So would you like to put anything forward?
You want to start, Carl?
Can I come in, Chair, if I may? Yeah. I think on balance, I'm minded to sort of concentrate on the options listed under C. Option A is do nothing, which clearly is not a sustainable situation to sort of take. B is a minimal upgrade and refurb and continue to be managed by the council. I don't think that's going to progress us very far. And I think we might find ourselves in a similar situation in a couple of years down the line when the building gets a bit tired and so on. And I'm very much against option D, to dispose of it entirely. So I think our conversation should centre around the options and the C. There are 4 of those. I am taken with sort of the staff there. They are the USP. As said, they're really committed, motivated, a group of people, small group of people, with sort of extended length of service there, and they do reach out beyond a springboard into the sort of business and entrepreneurial and innovation we're trying to achieve in Torvine. Basically, I'm minded to go with option C3. That we jointly sort of run it with a commercial partnership, and we continue to focus on sort of upskilling and training, advice, and we get that churn of people, and we get it back to an innovation centre, not a serviced office, and I'm minded to go with C3 because I think that offers us that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that, and that would be my thought process too, would be C3. I think you're right. It's definitely the best option, I think, and the passion that the Springboard team show is phenomenal. So, yeah, I think that is the best move for Springboard, in my opinion, as well. Councillor Hall, your thoughts, please?
Yeah, I kind of echo your same thoughts. I think option 3 is to help move forward with it. It's really beneficial. So yeah, I take on board everybody's thought about this, and I tend to agree with option 3 as well.
Councillor Cowles?
Yeah, just to make things easy, yeah, I agree with all the previous speakers. I think option C3 on balance is the one that I think we should go for. I think it's got the most solid timetable for implementation as well, and I'm confident that option C3 is the one to move the Springboard Innovation Centre forward. So I completely agree with all three of you.
Okay, that's brilliant. So if I just hand over to Rebecca now for a sec.
So can I just check with members? Obviously, I'll list C3 then as your preference, but did you want to make any comments on any of the others under category C? As Rachel mentioned, they'll be doing a full options appraisal on them. So did you want to make any other comments on any of those, or do you solely want to concentrate on C3 as your preference?
I personally would prefer just to concentrate on C3 so they can see there's a clear indication from this committee of the direction we'd like to take it. So agenda item 6 then is the item for the next meeting. Rebecca, can you give us a lowdown on that?
Thank you, Chair. So if you members are on page 67 of the report, you'll see this is the item where you consider the item that you'll be taking to the next scrutiny meeting. As you will recall, in visioning back in June, you selected a basket of items, and that is listed under Appendix 1. At the time, you agreed on Section 106 planning agreements come in. However, as we stated to you at the time, the basket is flexible and the work plan can be changed at any time if any other priorities come on. So we always at this point discuss audit referrals and anything that has come up in the exec forward plan. So if I just take you through those as well, in the exec forward plan, there's the shared prosperity fund, which isn't necessarily an item suitable for scrutiny, and also the Monmouthshire and Brecon Canal Strategy and Management Plan. Now, you did consider that as part of your visioning, and just put that as a floating item. You didn't particularly prioritise that, and then there were no audit referrals on this occasion. Okay. So, members, are you happy to stick with your previously agreed Section 106 planning agreements as the item that you'll consider next time?
Carl, do you want to make any comments?
Yeah, that's acceptable. Yeah.
Yeah, we should be fine on that,
Yeah, fine.
Okay, so agenda item 7 is the close of the meeting. So I'd just like to thank everybody for their attendance today, and I will now close the meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.